And, of course, Frank pays for an advertisement in the Los Angeles Free Press where he writes a letter arguing with these competitors, artistic competitors. So if nobody is going to say anything, then I'm going to mute everybody except for Roxy.
I have something.
Sure now. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so on Frank Zappa's exposure to
Mercury,
the technologies that were new at that time.
Yes.
Some of these technologies I remember hearing were the early digital instruments that were used to record sound into digital formats, right?
Yeah.
So from MP3 to all these little digital audio formats, these early machines were recording, like just regular sound at the most accurate measure, where like some of these digital files of one song would be like almost like 30 gigabytes because the quality were spot on, right? So they realized, like, okay, this is good. We can, take this file, this 30 gigabyte file, and give it to, one of these manufacturers who are recording on a mass scale, and then you can just like transmit that digital copy that was only being handed out between industries, and they can use that as a kind of like a sort of like a blank, I'm sorry, not blank, like a template to transmit the songs onto vinyls and 8-tracks and cassette tapes and all that stuff, right? So Frank Zappa had a huge collection of these machines that were like the size of like an entire room. They were used to do very, very simple jobs, which were to either edit and break down the information that were being recorded, and at the same time, these processes were being experimented with to see how music can evolve when it comes to editing and handling and all that stuff. So at that time, they were pretty new. They're as big as the old school computers, but then they realized, like, you know what, going into a more minimal age, let's see if we can get this technology that used to fit into a room into people's pockets. And they realized, okay, let's shrink down the hardware. But how are we going to get these digital copies out, And they pretty much came up with ways to shrink those 30 gigabyte files of these songs that were like in pure quality down to something that was like, like much, much lesser in quality, which are MP3s. So we have the more like we have the pocket technologies, and we have a digital format that engages with the creative industry, or more like the independent market, where every person can be handed the hardware that Frank Zappa used to play with, and go ahead and mix and play and literally apply the same principles of editing, where they can still exercise the creative side.
Yeah, I was saying that's why Frank died. The Android Mini gave people the ability to compose even beyond the technology he had pretty quickly and a few years later. So Frank died to remain the standard of original, literate, individualist, unique artistic inventiveness that everybody is going to be measured up against, too, just like Joyce did that with Phineas Wake. So, we talked. Go ahead.
You have a point there. I'm glad that you brought that up, because think about also the exposure to these machines at the time that were quite new, because they did emit a certain type of radiation that most people weren't used to. So think about Frank working with these machines all the time and conducting his system. So we don't know how these machines were affecting his space. He was literally like he was like a Tesla of music. What I believe,
like Madame Curie. Madame Curie, I think, got radioactive. The one who discovered uranium. Madame Curie, 19th century. Yeah, go ahead.
Which I think is important to mention with the technologies is that it enables us to understand the frequencies and to see that sound is tactile. All frequencies are tactile because light and sound, especially light, I think it's already proven, is
we're hearing new things.
Particles and waves at the same time. And the particles are, there is friction among them and bondings. And so this tactile starts at this molecular particle and then goes to the eye cells that amplify the frequencies that are the right ones that are going to morph matter in a new way.
Right, and on the way to the eye cell, you go through radiation frequencies.
Okay.
And, go ahead.
This was, he's also speaking about the inaudible.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean the frequency is not there and it's affecting you at many levels. And I think he wanted to translate this type of hearing in many levels.
Yeah, McLuhan
not only
defined
through the air.
Right, and McLuhan defined a seer, a prophet, who is someone who sees the invisible environment shaping the tribe that he's a member of. So all, pre-literate seers, then literate seers, great poets, and then great novelists and great other kinds of writers, musical thing. They are pointing out the invisible environment. Well, Frank acted that literally. He spelled out that he was doing the invisible environment, whereas the artists before, in the 19th, earlier centuries, didn't say that they were pointing out the invisible effects on people. With the retrospective we have now, McLuhan could say that. This is common denominator. The artist, the seer, the prophet, was pointing out the hidden environment that the tribe didn't see.
So,
and I know what he said. There is God, then the big note, and then
other things.
The thing, other things.
And other things. That's past God and the big note. That would be like Ian's idea of there are different kinds of eternities. So when you talk about God and the big note, you're getting into some eternal scenario. But the other things would be other eternities.
Okay. So he exposed himself to these environments that are like the big note environment in a way. He was able to kind of sample it and play with it.
He was the canary in the mine, but it's not. He may not have been affected by the radiation. Ian says, it's not as dangerous as people think, and people do adapt to it. But he did a lot of coffee and cigarettes, so the eco-fascists in the health world would say, he killed himself with all that coffee and cigarettes. But then there's the fact, in this other dialogue I had with Ike Willis, more confidential dialogue, but it's available, where we point out how Frank was murdered. So there's different ways to look at Frank. So I wouldn't focus on just one of them. Don't focus on one theory. He never died, and there's also a point he never died.
But he saw that art was becoming the environment. I think we said that in pop art, the art is becoming the environment. In
pop art, the artist takes the environment, his local environment of his environment.
In music, that happened before with the musique concrète. We were already saying, Pierre Schaeffer was saying, all sounds are objects. And there is the musical sound, the artificial sound, and the environmental sounds that they want to use in the new music. because they can now record them and mix them, and they're trying to translate how the environment is a new art form. And Frank Zappa was completely aware of that it's
right,
not only the
William
music.
William Burroughs, McLuhan reviews in 1964 Naked Lunch and the Nova Express or Ticket to Express, whatever it's called, the other book, and he points out that the 20th century artist retrieves the role of the pharaoh. The pharaoh would, orchestrate whole environments and pyramids and scenarios for his own glorification. So McLuhan said 20th century, the great artists like Joyce, maybe Canto, Pound, and we'd have to include Zappa, were programming and using the whole world as their content. So when I was talking to Ike about how Frank was using everything that he could experience and molding it, that he would be a later version of the pharaonic, of the pharaohs, of the pharaonic Egyptian art, which programmed the whole environment. And Zappa did say around 1970 that he felt that music was behind the other arts, had not caught up. So he was catching up on the pharaonic molding of the whole planet, a satellite conductor. So I was rehearing the dialogue with Ike. I said, oh yeah, there's the pharaonic idea that I've been talking about that Burroughs tried and Joyce tried and Wyndham Lewis did. So that's what you're talking about here. It's a retrieval of the Egyptian pharaonic art. You get that?
Yes, how the artist is really sculpting the macrostructure, like he calls it, and it's continuity, non-stop.
Conceptual continuity.
Yes, and he talks also about landscape modification, like McLuhan expands on the concept of landscape. But now
you heard
only the out, you heard also the inside.
Right, you heard this. You heard this whole thing the other day, right?
Right.
So you heard. You didn't just hear the first part of this Ike Willis thing. You heard the whole thing. So you heard the talking about sculpting landscape modulation. I had not heard that in a long time. So rehearing it, it was supporting what we were saying the other day. Right? He has it right there. Global, earthly, earthworks, earth modulation.
Yes, and for example, Ian and McLuhan also make us aware that this landscape modification, that these modulations are taking place outside and inside in this
our interior landscape and our external.
Of the dialogue. It's internal. It's at the level of the ISO and outside.
And external. It's a tactile interplay. That's tactility. So you don't say it's both inner and outer. You point out it's the interplay, like in the corpus callosum of the brain. It's the interplay he's illustrating. Mm-hmm. It's the inner and the outer are interchangeable, and maybe you can blur it. It's the interplay that's important.
It's the one that is becoming a new environment. The one that we used to have these fragmentations of perception and kingdoms and everything, but now it's finally.
Well, that's Hegel's synthesis. Hegel's synthesis, has different parts of matter conflicting, and then they synthesize, and then you create a new output dialectic of substances arguing, and then they synthesize. So there's always the absorbing of the previous technologies. It's always absorbing, which I think is what Frank Zingroni pointed out when he described the pentad. He tried to go past McLuhan and said there's the fusion aspect that should be part of the pentad, the subsuming of previous environments in the latest technology. And so that processing the whole environment, that's what Egyptian art did. It considered the whole world its content.
So do you think he was an ambassador of some of these environments, or this environment he was playing in a way?
He was an ambassador of the perception of it.
Oh my God!
Let me see. Where did I put the quote? I post on Facebook, but he talks about how time equals wave, and they cancel each other out. And then he says at the end of the quote, viewed from a distance, this experience that's going nowhere because time is canceled out. He says, viewed from a distance, it looks like a solid object.
Yeah.
So Frank was in that position of viewing from the distance the solid object that he would alter based on the ingredients that made up the environment of interplay. That from a distance, that means with the eye, looked like a solid object. But the world is not a solid object when you use the other senses. That's why LaRouche says, particles is not a good definition of what's happening.
Oh.
Atoms, electrons, minor, not good, mistaken, product of literacy.
Still the visual bias that we need to explain things in the visual somehow understand.
Yeah, we have to translate in the visual. And I remember once Eric, somebody brought it up, Eric McLuhan, about 1986. We were at the Coach House, and someone said, which came first, the eye or the ear? And Eric says, we don't know. That's a hard one to figure out.
And I was also thinking how he will just give some ingredients to the musician.
Yes.
Like, okay, here you have the rhythm, but there is no melody. So you do the melody or whatever. And Ian was doing that too. Like he tells us something, but then we have to ask. And I found also very interesting that the opera ends with these questions. Like the first one is, did I wake you up? Like the singing wake.
Yeah, you don't want to wake God up. That's your first concern. Did I wake you? I don't want to wake you.
It's like we are God being awakened.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, good point. Did I wake you up? Like the human can wake up the angel. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, when you meet a God who's not you, a God is less than you. It's a substitute God. And then you would ask, have we made you realize that I'm a bigger God than you? Did I wake you up? Yeah, good point.
And then the last is, when are you going to America? Where are you coming to America?
A-M.
That's another very ironic point that...
Yeah, it's spelled A-M-N-E-R-I-C-A, America. Android Me is in the A-M. See, he's saying America's been replaced.
Maybe that we don't remember.
Yes, amnesia, really, definitely. Well, Android Meme is it. The Android Meme is a global theater. The Android Meme is a memory theater. It remembers more than we can remember about ourselves. So amnesia is an okay condition. You don't need to remember anything. You just have to remember what to say on who you confront, who you are forced to respond to. That's what you have to remember. Basically just say, yeah, yo, what's up, what up? That's all you have to say. Get by. That's all you have to remember. You certainly wouldn't. McLuhan used to buttonhole, professors and priests on the campus of St. Michael's and force them to dialogue with them right there, walking between classes. It was a nuisance. He didn't go, what up, yo, how you doing? He didn't stay phatic.
Bob, you're amazing. This opens up everything, man.
For you, no longer a Jehovah's Witness? Have we killed that in you?
Yes, sir.
Very good. Job well done. This opens up a whole new whatever for yourself, right?
I'm just going to say yes. Just yes.
Oh, okay, I want to read this.
Another thing, when he's, I think it's in the interview he's doing, he says, the first phase was the experimentation, then the construction of the project.
Yes. He talks about pre-plans. Now, pre-plans is the effects preceding causes. That's neutrino, knowing it's already happened. And in retrospect, he was guided to make the project. It includes the planning that he didn't know he was doing or that was done for him. Yeah, go ahead.
Then after the construction of the project, it was the work still in progress without total control.
Right. Attention to minute detail. Attention to minute detail.
But
every
the non-planned affecting the
non-planned. That's right. Interfering with the plans. So why does this open everything for you, Yuri? What's being opened? Can you say?
Okay. So back in high school, I was introduced to Frank Zappa accidentally, and my favorite song became Montana. He was talking about moving to Montana to start a dental floss company, right?
Yes.
And I don't know, it stuck with me because, I don't know, there was something about the whole pioneer aspect about that, but in a sort of digital way. And I really took that to heart because I really wanted to experience more than just New York City, right? New York City was
right. That's
so
where you
fast.
grew up, New York City. You grew up in New York City. Yeah.
Yes. So Frank Zappa just kind of pulled me out of New York City and just kind of planted me in a space and just told me to write whatever comes to mind in a way, just, poetically speaking, metaphorically speaking, and all that. And I just didn't know what I was doing, but I was just doing, and I was just doing. And
you're trying to
all of a sudden, I ended up finding all kinds of really cool stuff along the way, and I just went along with it. But all of that experience I gained along the way landed me in this moment where it's literally just kind of like opening up like a treasure chest, not a Pandora's box, but more like a treasure chest, because I'm looking at all the things I'm taking out of this chest that kind of formed out of everything I collected along the way. And then when I'm, with engaging with Ion and you, I felt like I opened the chest and I'm looking at all of this really cool stuff, and I'm like, what the hell is this? How did I make this? And it's helping me appreciate technology in a whole new way. I never imagined. So that's pretty much it. It's just opening up an education about tech in a way I never thought would happen.
Right. Now, let me add this suggestion, is that you never got spelled out to you, an artist being so comprehensive in their project as Zappa, as you hear about Zappa tonight. So you're hearing for the first time what a great artist does, the range of their creativity. So you fall into that new space that you had a limited view of what the artist did. Now you're here a Da Vinci kind of artist, and it opens up a big space for you. So you're now a kid walking around in a candy store, and that's what you mean. Holy shit, there's all this interesting technology. I didn't appreciate what could be done with it.
Yeah. It makes me look at education in a whole new way.
Can you say what it is? What it is that's new?
About education that I see?
Yeah. You say you look at it, you mean schooling?
Yes, schooling, learning. It kind of uses, I'm just going to look at this environment that is the teacher. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how it speaks, but it speaks through the sciences I'm familiar with. And I learned that way.
Yeah, that was, like McLuhan said, Rousseau invented that environment educates man. When he was talking about how nature made a good, primitive man. But actually it's true that the real education is all the environment. And that was the real agenda of Frank Zappa, was to educate people, not only with his music, but with his whole work that includes all of his movies, his videos, his speech, everything. And I think Ian says always everything has been recorded, but this replaying of the recording is like a Zappa song that it's record, but there is space for the new creation, the new improvisation, the unforeseen. It's a replay, but there is new elements.
Yeah.
Roxy was quoting Rousseau. Rousseau, 1700s, a French philosopher, just so you know what she said, Rousseau.
Yes, Rousseau.
R-O-U-S-S. E-A-U. So,
E-A-U, okay.
Yeah, the both and. The and part is what Frank knows is the unfolding of a momentary present. There's a huge now, and then the now already happened, so there's not even a big now ultimately. But as you engage in the illusion of a present, you know that it's open for other factors, even though it's repeating a lot of archetypes. And it's just an old record going over, stuck in the groove. But there's room for new. And Frank wanted people to see that. He was trying to teach people how to see opportunities that they didn't have to stay stuck in their routines.
But it's such a beautiful way of being aware.
Yeah, living.
Yeah, it's like breathing in a whole new way. It's like, wow, I didn't know I can breathe in like a hex format. Wow, I didn't know I can breathe in a circle format. Wow, a square format? I can breathe like that? Whoa. You
see, that interview that I did with Ike, that should be played in any creative department in a high school. See, if a kid hears that, it's going to affect them. They don't know people. They don't have those role models. They don't know people are thinking and doing all kinds of interesting things to make their art and on a big scale. And it's so funny, he has the executive, being a numbskull, just comically not understanding at all what Frank could be, or what he himself, the executive, could be.
Yes, because I think in the situation we're now, like last week there was this news about a girl that had been in social media for a long time, and now she decided everything was a lie, because before she posted a selfie, she will make like 100, and then she will go and edit it and Photoshop everything. So what she was presenting was a big lie. But the thing is, now that we have this new power of affecting the environment and creating our virtual platforms, I think it's important not only for the arts to understand these ideas of how the environment is educating you and affecting you and feeding you, because otherwise people start having this conflict about what is reality, what is right, what is wrong, and it's
what
about
am I responsible for?
Yeah, the new power we have. And these amazing possibilities that Frank wanted you to be aware of, that you are in charge, and you have to make it interesting and fun. It doesn't have to be,
right.
I don't know, conform to stereotypes. It's like...
Okay, I found a really good statement that I prepared. That dialogue he has with Flo and Eddie on the radio in New York in 1989, talking to the two ex-Turtles that were in his band? There's a section at the end, which is one of the best statements I ever heard anybody say about what I was trying to say and what McClone predicted. Let's just... bring that up here. It's just a minute or so. But listen to how, here's Frank in 1989. They've had, 8 years of Reagan. And it looks pretty bleak. But Frank doesn't have that view. So where is that? Just a second. Oh, it's over in my email. Okay, just a second. Frank.
Well, in the meeting, I just say, it's like the Android meme is the Frank Zappa, and he tells you, okay, here's the rhythm, now you add the melody. And this is what we're doing in social media and all these things, all these possibilities we have to create. So,
and that's what McLuhan said. The key thing with the electric age. Listen to this. The key thing in the electric age was we had to start making our own senses, making our own consciousness. Whereas the literate Gutenberg phase was matching with an external kingdom, an outer reality. So that's what you're just saying. And it's even the Android meme makes you make more and more than television or 60s technology did. But the beginning of participation comes in with the vortices, with Lewis, Pound, and Eliot and Joyce. They say the co-maker of the art is the audience who reads your production.
And that's what you played, I am saying, this is phase 3, is when you start saying how things are going to be and how you want.
Yeah, the ball's in your court. You've got control of your mind, or loosened up about your mind. You've been altered on the cellular level. Now the ball's in your court for phase 3. You determine how far you want to go. But, you can't start 3. You got to do 1 and 2 first.
Right, and Zappa was in a way a big rehearsal of that, showing how to do it, how to interact with other creators and make your own creation and take from these other improvisations or collaborations or dialogue or conversations, and he makes us aware that it's not just like you're making a piece of music; it's your whole environment, all your life, non-stop is now.
Right. And who you're doing it with. It's beautiful. It's beautiful the way Ike describes how he had to make half the art piece. Now the original Mother's Invention, they got very mad at that retrospective and said, holy shit, we should get money from these albums. We helped create them. And I don't know if Frank was right, but they settled out of court. But it didn't occur to them at the time that they could be part of it. They were just doing it. They didn't know Frank would put himself as the owner on it, I guess.
Interesting.
Well, because at the end, he was making the choices of what is going to be left out, and
they let him be the editor.
Yes, and that's the end creation.
Right. He made the final controlling the negotiations. I guess paid for the cost of everything. He did the managerial work while the rest of the guys were, buzzing off, getting stoned, not taking responsibility for the work, for the final work.
But he was paying them for their work, for rehearsals. But I think he saw the ended work as his own authoring.
And if you didn't get pissed off at that, you could continue working with him, which is what Ike did. Ike accepted the co-creative thing and didn't make a big deal about getting the rights. He just enjoyed being there, working with a good mind to work with. So that's the best attitude. They'll stay there longest. So let me play. Here's a statement by Zappa, which is I'd never heard before, but it's a good validation of what he says is coming. Now, I think I've got the volume up. Sound. Yeah, okay, it should go. I'm going to mute everybody in case I don't want any noises. Mute.
All participants are now muted.
Relates to what you were just saying, Roxy. Okay.
Changed so much from the 60s.
I think that my favorite quote that I've been cycling all over town is this, especially when they talk about LSD. When LSD was invented, it was created as a chemical warfare substance, not a toy. It wasn't to expand your consciousness. It was designed to incapacitate an enemy. So the people who made it put it into the U.S. population to test it. The net result was 20 years later, these people people who used it turned into born-again Christians and yuppies. I would say this is an incredibly dangerous drug.
Poison, absolute poison. It is. Would you ever think after all these years that your pals Mark and Howard would wind up on an album with your kids, Moon and Dweezil, on that Gumby record? What is happening?
Well, everything is happening, and that's what's good. You know, it's the only thing that gives us hope for the 90s, that the stranglehold of the people who wanted to turn America into a beige place is gradually getting broken, and that people are waking up, that you can have fun in life and you don't have to be guilty about it, and everybody should do a bunch of stuff, and, you know, let's have a good life here.
Remember that button? You had the button, even...
Okay, that's a very important statement. Here it is, the late 80s. Everybody's worrying about Bush becoming the president, the CIA director. But if you actually looked around in the environment of the 80s and going into the 90s, it was incredible new technological decentralization and new potentials of expression.
All participants are now unmuted.
Keep going on, basically, in society. And the old institutions of social control weren't in control anymore, which is the reason 911 happened on one level, was that you had to, you know, the global solar planners felt that things were getting out of hand, just like they thought things were getting out of hand when Kennedy was on TV and being popular beyond Big Brother's controlling of information. So they had to get rid of Kennedy, his charisma. So here's this charisma of people freeing up and doing all kinds of things, late 80s and 90s. The oligarchs got, or the managers, they got paranoid. So they said, we got to reinstill fear in everybody. So one of the reasons they concocted was for 911 was the social freedom. Now, Zappa predicts it, because you would get that from McLuhan. He was saying that from the 60s. We got incredible freedom, decentralization, multi-consciousness happening. A lot of bizarre forms will show up, and it's going to unfold naturally and humorously, and Zappa sees that. You get my point, Roxy? That he sees the freedom that's happening by the end of the 80s. Are you there? I've unmuted you. Did I get cut off?
I think she got cut off.
Oh, okay. Well, you see that, Yuri?
Yes.
You might think society is bleak today, being younger and all that. Well, yeah, it got to retrieve some bleakness after 911, but it's interesting to hear one of the reasons of what was happening way beyond whether this was a democracy or a communist or a fascist society. People were starting to build other bodies by the late 80s and early 90s. And what Frank said there applied.
So,
I mean, here it is. Frank's a satirist, but he's saying the environment is becoming very interesting for people. So what were you going to say?
Well, I was wondering if these new bodies or new infrastructures were a product of what was introduced during the 80s, the late 70s and 80s.
Say that again. Do that again. I got distracted.
Okay, so So all the new stuff, or like all the stuff that was introduced during the late 70s and 80s, were products of the technological shifts. And I was wondering, with all the shift in consciousness and all that stuff, and like new ways of having multi-consciousness, I was wondering if that was a product of all of these shifts that were going on during those decades.
Okay, you see how you're not saying it clear. You're wondering if the shifts were a product of the shifts. See,
yes.
Which do it better. Be more precise in your words.
No,
What do you?
I think he wants to know how the other bodies were created.
Okay, hey, I just noticed your email. Do you have to go soon? Isn't it like 8:30 in? Oh no, you're an hour behind, so you've got another 40 minutes, about, or maybe even just 20 minutes, right, Roxy? You got to go at 8.
Yes, I could be until 8:15.
Okay, good. So Okay, no, I don't know. Look, Yuri, what were you? Of course, society was changed by the technology. So, what are you trying to find out?
How the new bodies were created from that.
Of the digital environment shrunk the previously big analog media environments, the big radio environment, the big television environment, the big movie environment, the telephone, all those major media that were separate extensions of our separate senses, they're going to be fused and shrunk once you get into the digital, subsuming them. So all these huge environments, which were huge in the first half of the 20th century up till, say, 1980, once the digital absorbing and making them all one and tiny, then I say the landscape, which was bigger than you, shrinks, and it becomes an appendage to you, an organ or a body. All right? Mm-hmm. That's how it happens. It's just a digital miniaturization that happens. Turns these huge landscapes, and so that, you know, on the iPhone, people got 100 million radio shows right there in their little iPhone. So the radio has disappeared.
Everybody started to freak out and be afraid of the chip that was supposed to be implanted, but I think
it was implanted in a different way.
Yeah,
it was implanted into your headphone.
It's been made small, and there was this this new paranoia of something like a chip being inserted in you to control you.
Right, and you're being massaged by the external chip and its miniaturization, like the iPhone, so that you'll accept the implanting in your skin chip at some point.
Yes. So the body takes shape to what it's playing with?
The body takes shape with what it's... Yes, the body is shaped by what it's playing with.
Okay.
Your perceptions are shaped. Like in med school, if they did an anatomy class in med school, they'd have to add imageries of the TV organ, the chip organ, and maybe the astral organ to the skeleton and bones image they have of the chemical body. You know, they got to add these other bodies. They don't do that in medicine.
Okay.
Really, what you see is very limited because so much of the chip landscape, chip bodies, are not visualizable. Can you visualize where we are right now? No. We're not anywhere. And we're not moving. We're just resonating into some membrane. We're not moving anywhere. I don't have to, mail a message to you. You're right here in the same space getting the messages.
Yeah, we're not even radio waves.
That's right. Or something else.
So what we're experiencing right here is an example of the bodies, or like the multiple bodies.
What happened? Yeah, the environment. You're experiencing your chip body. So you look at the telephone. Now, McLuhan was saying 50, 80 years ago that the idea of the chip going inside you and programming you, it was already happening with the electric environment with radio. So he said by 1950, man had fused with the machine. By 1950, there had been this cyborgian creation. Yet most people think the cyborg doesn't happen until it hasn't happened yet, just starting. But you have to look at the electric environment implies all future variations of the essential merger between man and machine.
Okay, so the merger has to be complete, almost like a file being downloaded to 100% before the cyborg comes out.
Well, McLuhan says by the time it's downloaded, you wouldn't have any problem with it.
Okay.
So when everybody got worried in the mid-'50s about this coming cyborging thing, McLuhan says, well, you're going to have to turn off the environment if you're serious. You're going to have to turn off the radio and TV environment if you're really afraid of being cyborg, because it's already here. But people thought it had to be a robot or a Terminator kind of thing where you're walking around two-thirds made of metal, but they didn't see the landscape, the discarnate environment was already a possession of humans. And I listed that inventory of all the changes in society over the last 100 years caused by the impersonal discarnate possession. And that environment has shrunk and been fragmented into bodies.
So what was it that introduced this environment that's made of materials of like chips and metal and what was it that
everything? It began with the fall. It began with the fall, where someone tried to communicate something to someone else through ESP. That's the picture in Sistine Chapel, right? Adam reaching out to talk to God. He's trying to make a connection with something external or something other than himself. That's the first fall. And then that leads to every other technology that's ever going to be made. Because every word evokes every later word.
Expand again to all our completed state of ascended man. But we thought the extensions were outside because the power is outside still. We think we need a relationship, we need family, we need everything outside.
Roxy, I would say that early pre-literate man knew it was maybe in other worlds, maybe inner. What people are retrieving in the New Age is what people did before writing and printing. It became outer when you start having visual space and writing in the printing press. And now with the electric age, we're retrieving the going inner and others worlds, not limited to the visual solid object. But then Ein comes to push it even further. So it's only outer in the visual phase, which is, as McLuhan said, very short time, only 400 years. Now we're back into inner space, non-visual space again.
So would you call these infrastructures of Cain, between Cain and Abel?
Yes, McLuhan, in his doing Bible metaphors, Cain was the engineer. He's the father, I think, of engineers, and they're the faction of Lucifer.
I get it.
Whereas the artist looks at the effects of what the engineer makes. And he could say, let's kill this engineer. We don't need a battery. That's the famous Baghdad battery, 3,000 years ago. The king killed the guy who brought in the batteries. Jesus, this will wipe out everything. This will change it. Fuck that shit. But that did not... it does not hold. In the long run, in the long run, the wisdom is we will extend your body. This is what, Nostradamus, John the Revelator, they saw the unfolding of technologies. It was inevitable. We would extend all of our body parts. So once you know that, you'll know what's going to happen to human no matter what point they start in a civilization. So if we all wipe...
We can link this last expansion with Frank because the eye cell, which is not cyber expansion, but it's organic, it's inside.
Yes.
Actually helps you to listen to the right frequency to hear that new song Ion is talking about. That
yes.
It's a frequency that we could not hear with the cells that are not perfected. And we need to tune into that frequency, to that big note and the other thing. So
I would go so far. As you get, and I'm not going to use the word ascended anymore. Ian said use the word transcension at some point. So as I was saying last week, I'm not of this world, but when I go to another world, I'm not of that world either. I'm not of any world that I can potentially access. So that means I'm in the interval. So rather than ascending, if I have access to other worlds, or higher worlds or lower worlds, you're transcending. That means going across. So in this transcension, what did you just say? What were your last words? I was responding to you.
But it's about listening.
Oh, yeah. Right. So I say that as you become transcending and you take your cells are getting changed, you're going to want more excellent, richer experiences. And that'll be found in listening to Frank's music, reading McLuhan or Wyndham Lewis or LaRouche or Croker or Tom or Krishnamurti, Beater, and myself. Those things are your media diet when you get serious because you're able to understand more on your expanded double helix strands.
See,
so that is the curriculum.
people will be having this crisis like this girl that they become a DOFA. And they say, I'm God, but I'm a liar. And
right.
They have this...
Their concepts are inadequate
breakdown
to their feelings. Right. Their concepts have not kept up to the inflation that Web 2.0 gave people. See, your mind, that's phase 3. Their ideas about themselves get conflicted, get contrasted because they haven't gone into exile, silence, and cunning and done some private study of the holy offices to prepare your perceptual shift.
So this is connected to conceptual continuity?
No, yes, and no. It's perceptual expansion, perceptual continuity also, not just conceptual. Now, abstract, you hear me and Ike talking about abstract is a good way to describe the present situation. You had abstract art, you had abstract music. The Android mean is abstract tactility. The Android mean is a very tactile environment. It squares the original one in the global theater, 50 years ago. So it's abstract tactility. And another way to say that, this Android mean has come alive and has abandoned me. It's taken on a life of its own. That's what you were saying about that young woman, Roxy, that she thought her world around her had come alive or something, right?
Yes, everything is a lie. And,
a lie! I thought you were saying alive. It's everything. Yeah, and that's stuck in the visual parameters of a literate person worrying about what to match with. Do I match with the truth or do I match with the lie? I have to know which is the truth and which is the lie. You don't have to. When you're in the middle of a rocking 2-hour musical, extravaganza with me DJing, you're not worrying about what is lie and what is true. You're just dancing to the music. You're participating. So pre-literate people did not worry about what was true and what was a lie. And this is what Julian Jaynes in his book, The Breakdown of the Origins of the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, he was trying to say, describe the pre-literate mind that heard voices and this total chaos compared to ours. They weren't trying to, the Eskimos didn't even have a word for why. They didn't have any linear sequence of thought. They didn't have ideas of causes.
Oh, no.
Okay, that's a good punchline.
Very interesting. But the motivation of the new pharaohs is just to get likes. And that's
to get a minor matching. Liking is matching. Totally, the whole matching enterprise of 500 years has been reduced to going, yes, I can match with this.
Yeah, I have so many followers. Oh, wow. But then that's not completion. That's when you have this crisis. It's like where I'm investing so much time in creating this illusion. I'm a DOFA.
Now, it's not an illusion because you're dancing to it. You're dancing to the emails and messages are coming to you. You're a dangling ganglia, nervous ganglia, bouncing with other ganglia with no movement. And
yes,
once
but that
is
not completion somehow.
No,
at the end.
That's agitation. It's agitation, and he likes that.
Keep going.
The alien among us likes it. Hey, the alien being. Okay, here's what I want to do next while Roxy's here. We have to continue this hilarious advertising Zappa's doing in the Los Angeles Free Press and whatever other local papers are featuring it. So he has this battle with a guy named Ziedler, and I was talking about that earlier. So Ziedler is ripping off Frank as perceived by Frank. So let's hear this. Let me read it, and I won't mute you so I can hear you laughing. So it says, this is the official news of MOI, M-O-I, which stands for Mothers of Invention, but it also can stand for the French meaning me, the official news of me. And it says, Mothers Force...
The name Mother of Invention is the state of the phase 3. Everybody is a mother of invention. The moi.
Right. Yes. Yeah, you. It's the official news of you, which you read it, and it's me. Yeah, you is me. So he has a picture, and he has freak off, in brackets, in the name of justice. And then it has someone saying, "Oh no, he has struck me squarely in the chops with his head." Unk. And I think it's Herbie Cohn has hit the other guy, the competitor. And it says, "Super Manager, story below." And then it says, "Mothers forced to cancel out October 15th from the Earl Warren Showgrounds in Santa Barbara due to a critical acoustic problem and virtually non-existent PA facilities. We will, however, perform in Santa Barbara at the San Marcos High School Auditorium." Can you imagine this? Going to Frank's kid at high school? And they're playing in your high school. That'd be great. Now, what's her name? Lady Ohm had that experience. Lady Ohm, what's her name? Leslie. So here's what the title says. Phony Freakins, because remember, Frank's coined freak out, but there's other guys putting on freak-ins. Phony Freakins, Ziedler dope ads, and Carl Franzoni's letter. Carl was one of the original wild dancers around Vito, and Ziedler is this competitor, and something doing with him smoking dope or something. So Frank says, kindly read this. A statement of policy from Frank Zappa for the Mothers of Invention. Last week's issue of the Los Angeles Free Press contained 3 items in print, which we feel bear analysis and discussion. First, the Freak-In ad for the Shrine Exposition Hall. So that's his competitors. The Freak-In ad for the Shrine Exposition Hall. He says, the Mothers of Invention, that's capital letters underlined, the Mothers of Invention are in no way, shape, or form connected with his airsats promotion. There he's used McLuhan's favorite word, airsats, meaning fake. Are not connected with this airsats, in no way, shape, or form connected with this airsats promotion event. We repudiate this act of mercenary indiscretion on these grounds. 1, we do not wish to be associated in name or spirit with any cornball effort to exploit free music, free dance, or free people as we see it being done here by these guys putting on the Freak-In. And then he quotes the ad. We quote the ad, in quotation marks, the world-famous artist and sculptor Vito with his wife, his child, and his entire entourage of dancers and freakers. In other words, Frank is mad that Vito is aligning himself with this maybe commercial enterprise, because Vito is very important at the freak-outs. But I'm not sure what's going on with Vito. Maybe the ad's lying. Maybe the ad is saying that Vito's there and Vito and them aren't going to be there. 2, we find the ad itself, the promoter's attitude toward his audience of freakers, and the unethical implications of this misguided attempt to corrupt something we as a group feel is valid and worth fighting for, to be totally bullshit. So we find the ad itself, the promoter's attitude and all that, to be totally bullshit. That is to say, freak-ins, also freak-offs and turn-ons, don't make it. So that was the first point with two subsets, 1 and 2. Now, second point, or second theme, the Ziedler and Ziedler, quote, dope fiend calendar ads. Dope fiend calendar, in quotes. Frank says, these nifty specimens of pre-pubic juvenilia, in brackets, hand-lettered and cartooned by a frustrated pseudo-freako from Laguna Beach named Howard James Baron von Lockway, who likes to advertise his radiant Buddhahood and worldly teenage knowledge of dope and drugs and stuff, along with Ziedler's threats, have twice included reference to freak-outs and to us as a group. So he's complaining that the ads and PR of the competitors are referring to Frank. Last week, Ziedler and Ziedler, in a flush of psychedelic bad judgment, driven by their invincible and unerring sense of the superficial, armed only with their total lack of taste and perception, saw fit, in their infinite lack of wisdom, to include a deftly secreted blurb which pleaded, quote, may the good dope fairy shine her love light on the Mothers of Invention. So they're trying to include the mother's charisma in this freaking thing. May the good dope fairy shine her love light on the Mothers of Invention, unquote. So Frank says, we are not, and this is in capital letters, we are not, no sir, buddy, flattered or enthused by Baron von Ziedler's imbecile attempt to assert his teenage, in the deepest Dick Clark sense of the word, his coolness by using our group name with all its inherent rural cleanliness and protein value. Hey, the Mother's Invention has rural cleanliness and protein value. There's the ionic. We got new proteins, new foods. By using our group name to, 1, Hassel Ziedler's MOD mod, I guess that's British mods, Hassel Ziedler's mod monstrosities, in brackets, with which we find it hard to identify, and or to endorse. So we, what was the original sentence? We, to teenage coolness, to Hassel Ziedler's thing, and then endorse any psychedelic, narcotic, or laxative substance. Laxative! That's Carolyn's magnesium. Endorse any psychedelic, narcotic, or laxative substance dispensed by fairies or any other superficially aberrated person by means of love light, Vaseline, state welfare, and or federal aid to education. The humor there. We don't endorse any psychedelic, narcotic, or laxative substance dispensed by fairies or any other superficially aberrated person by means of love light, Vaseline, state welfare, and or federal aid to education. Then he has in big capital letters. It appears that Baron von Ziedler wants to go out in a blaze of psychedelic martyrdom, in brackets, we could be wrong, as evidenced by his apparent fetish for advertising his knowledge and affinity for dope in quotation marks. This will note, remember, Frank is not that keen on dope. This will, no doubt, precipitate some sort of monstro bust at his pad, in brackets, he has pad in quotes, and in brackets he has hep talk. So to use the word pad, it's hep talk. And give him a lot to whip about when he gets out. In brackets, is the status really worth it? Wouldn't it be more fun to go back to surfing and playing with your crayons? Question mark. End of bracket. Therefore, we hereby make this kind and superficially generous offer. You ever done that, Roxy? Make a superficially generous offer? That is to say...
I do it every day.
We... That's right. You do it. We, the mothers of invention... agree to play on Mr. Ziedler's front lawn non-stop during the course of the routine narco bust tentatively described above. In brackets, yes, from the moment they kick down your door to the moment they kick down your nose. So he's saying this guy is advertising in various media about he's a real cool dope. And Frank's warning him, this will attract the police attention if you're saying you're pretty cool and dope. So it says, the mothers agree to play on Mr. Ziedler's front lawn non-stop during the course of the routine narco bust tentatively described above. Yes, from the moment they kick down your door till the moment they kick down your nose. Underlines nose, that hints of the nasal retentive aberration we were talking about earlier. Non-stop, he says. He repeats it. Non-stop, baby. For only... he says, for only half of what we normally get at the Whiskey A Go-Go, and all you have to do is get a lot of extension cords to the front yard for our amplifiers, providing, of course, that the heat lets us know about it a few days in front. So Frank's saying he hopes the cops tell him when they're going to bust Mr. Ziedler. You getting this? This is an ad. Disguised as a newsletter. So he says, for only half of what we normally... So he's saying, if you pay us just half of what we get at the Whiskey A Go-Go, but you also have to get a lot of extension cords to the front yard for our amplifiers. And then he has a dot, and it says, accepted by Ziedler and Ziedler. So this is a form for Ziedler to sign, to hire the mothers to play on his lawn when he gets busted. And he has in brackets after Ziedler and Ziedler, a swell bunch of guys and a heck of a good sport. God love them. So he says about the Ziedler and Ziedler, a swell bunch of guys and a heck of a good sport. God love them. God love them in capitals. Then he says, for further information, contact our super manager, Herb Cohen, who will also give you a good price or weddings and graduation parties. Not that you'll ever need it. Not that you'll ever get a gig at a wedding or graduation parties. So that was item 2, theme 3. The article, quote, A Mother Against LSD by Carl Franzoni. Now, we'll probably read that letter, but Frank says about it, Carl's worthwhile and well-intended letter to the editor was unfortunately incorrectly labeled as a public statement from a member of our group. Carl Franzoni is not a member of the Mothers of Invention, nor does he claim to be. But for the most part, we as a group agree with him in his plea for a sane drug policy. In brackets, basically, stick it up your ass and fly to the moon. That's Frank's drug policy. Now remember, this is in 66. when no one in the rest of America even knows about this dope problem, but it's happening, in L.A. and Sunset Strip like maybe the previous year or so. So it's all local anthropology we're reading. So Frank says, stick the dope up your ass and fly to the moon. And he says, we as a group do not recommend, verily we repudiate any animal/mineral/vegetable/synthetic substance, vehicle, and or procedure which might tend to reduce the body, mind, or spirit of an individual, in brackets any true individual, to a state of sub-awareness or insensitivity. That is to say, we are here to turn you loose, not turn you on. Turn yourself on. The sort of high you really want is a spiritual high, and you are bullshitting yourself if you trust any chemical and or agricultural shortcut to do it for you. You can't get busted yet for awareness. Maintain your aristocratic coolness. Sincerely, Frank Zappa for the Mothers of Invention. So, cool. You heard it here first. Hey! Cool.
With the Mother Superior.
Mother Superior talk from Frank. Now they have a parallel ad. It seems to be a coming freakout, an ad for a coming freakout, and it says, "Has it drawings of Frank and Susie Cream Cheese?" Susie Cream Cheese is saying, "Ourselves massaging." Remember you were talking about the massaging environment, Roxy? So here's she's not saying massaging. She says, ourselves massaging. Then someone says, you've made me use up the most priceless beans on earth, but it will be worth it when I see you go down in defeat before my very eyes. This whole thing about beans is coming from the Absolutely Free album, I think. Then a Frank-looking character says, you must come to this following address, all of you. In other words, not just posting the address where the performance is, but they're saying, you must come to the following address, all of you. And then it says, to life, exclamation mark. And then some other guy says, all he has to do is change size for us. Change size, like become a dwarf. And it says, it's a light show Nirvana, the original, and then collage, the original Nirvana. It says, dense, putrid vapors from a smoke gun. And then he says in brackets, we rent it. We rent the smoke gun. Dense, putrid vapors from a smoke gun. Then it says, many guest groups and groupies. And then another guy says, he's no mere simple madman, as I might have thought. He has too many weapons, too many powers. So these are like cartoon figures. And it says, at your neighborhood drive-in, watch for it, coming soon. So is there a part to this ad? Oh, yeah. A little to the left it says, it has Mothers of Invention, thrills and chills await you when you see 7 amazing plant creatures come. That's the RNA drops. Comes from barley. The amazing plant creatures coming. Of course, that's not what Frank meant. But we are hijacking this, and we actually are advocating, what did he say? We don't trust any chemical and or agricultural shortcut. Actually, it got so bad, 50 years later, Frank, we did need an agriculture shortcut, namely RNA drops. But back then, yes, as Ion once said, the last breakthrough of sort of inspirational social mortar reality was in the 60s. So here's Frank in the middle of it all, managing it, maintaining rational rules. We repudiate any animal, mineral, vegetable, synthetic substance. Now, this could be really criticized as Frank missed out on the Dr. Dean revolution, the vitamins and the supplements and all that. But he does say you should not be dependent on those things, and you're reduced to a state of sub-awareness. So it's the fact that you overdo it to a sub-awareness, Carolyn, he's criticizing. All right? All right, so back to this. So this... What'd you say? Great?
All right. All right.
Oh, all right. All righty. All right, so we should... 7 amazing plant creatures coming. Then Frank goes, Fortunately, my wings were able to break my fall. You must come to the following address, all of you. Ourselves massaging. He's no simple. Like, they're not saying who the madman is. It could be seen as Frank because he's the main face in there as the Antichrist. He's no mere simple madman as I might have thought. He has too many weapons, too many powers. All he has to do is change size for us. We'd better learn more about this. I'll take the mic, Pietro. Of course, have you so soon forgotten the voice of Giant Man? Giant Man. That would be the giant in the Jack and Beanstalk reference in the booklet on Uncle Meat at the end of the Uncle Meat scenario laid out in the Uncle Meat album. Of course, have you so forgotten the voice of Giant Man? Okay, is there anything now? Other cartoons. So these cartoons. Oh, here's one. Many cartoons. This is quite cluttered. So it's called Help Legalize Therapeutic Abortion with the Mothers. Help legalize therapeutic abortion with the mothers. In other words, it's not just physical abortion, I don't think. It's the abortion of discarnate space. And then it says, Mothers of Invention, Thrills and Chills await you when you see 7 amazing plant creatures. Then it says, money back guarantee. Order today and we will rush your Polaris nuclear sub to you. What do you think of that? They're offering a nuclear sub to the teenager. Order today and we will rush your Polaris nuclear sub to you. Use it for 10 full days. If you don't think it is the greatest ever, the best toy you ever had, just send it back for full purchase price and refund. Or full purchase price refund. Then he goes, but now, stand back. Now, we have him in 1977 doing that footage from Baby Snakes where he's playing Muffin Man, or leads into Muffin Man from whatever the song was before that. And Joey Psychotic is one of the ushers at the front of the stage. He's being crushed, and he's telling people to move back. And he goes, but stand back. No, he goes, stand back now. And then they roar into Muffin Man and just take off. And he throws a big toilet paper roll out in the audience. So I'm echoing, but now, stand back. Then another voice says, he's a phony. He'll never do it. And then someone else says, he's still breathing. But if he lost his power to change size, that would be Giant Man, that means he'll remain 10 feet tall. He'll be a freak. Then someone else goes, a little dwarf says, who are the brain police? Then another guy, another cartoon figure says, with this crystal ball taken from an ancient Tibetan monastery, I can hurl mystic rays at you, rays so powerful that no living man can resist them. Then there's another quote. It's from a scientist named Henry Pym. He wants us to help him find the ... And then it says, these are the beans which inspired the legend of Jack and the Beanstalk. Wow, that's the reference to the Uncle Meat thing I just mentioned. Because remember, something climbs up the vines to see Jack and the Beanstalk at the end of the story. And then someone goes, let's see it, Wanda. And he has a few images are from the famous 1930s film Freaks, Freaks. Circus, weird freak circus mutation people. You have those scattered through the ad. And when Frank was asked in the application form to be a member of United Mutations, the fan club, United Mutations, when they asked him what his favorite movie was, he filled in Freaks. So he's got the Freaks in the ad here. And then someone says, a genuine old time, and I don't know what's next. Then says, is she in danger? And then it has the word free. Then it says, then a scant few seconds later. And then a repeat of that thing. We'd better learn more about this. I'll take the mic, Pietro. Then it has a commercial. This could be the one that he's objecting to. It says, Vito, Sue, and Gatto, that's her baby, who later dies, present a freak-out, freak-in, freak-up, freak-down Halloween costume, mostly paint. Genitals must be mostly paint. Genitals must be covered. Dance at the Hullabaloo, Sunday, October 30th, across from the Palladium. 18 and over ID required. Light show music by the Daily Flash, by the Sparrow. 3 o'clock in advance, or $3 in advance. All mutual ticket agencies, $1 if you wear a veto button. So Frank objects to this commercialization of Vito. The problem is that Vito joined this, but Vito was dancing for everybody. So I don't think Frank can control Vito, but he objects to the environment.
I have to freak out and remove my protein content, but thanks a lot.
Well, you heard most of it.
It was wonderful.
Be sure to listen to the recording this week to catch up on what you're going to miss. Okay.
Of course, Mother Superior.
Yes, you mommy nun. Mammy nun, you.
The mommy nun is leaving.
Okay, thanks for being part of it.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Everybody. Hey, bye. And let's see if we have, we have Bellamy. What's that guy called? What's your name? Bramley?
Hello? Yeah.
Yes, Bramley. That's you, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yes. I noticed you just came in, so maybe you'll be able to help dialogue here. Maybe we'll encourage other people contributing because it's just me. Now, Madeline, are you still here? Or did you go to sleep? Your number's still here, but anyways.
Yeah,
read. Are you here? Okay, Madeline. Now, look, you don't need to have to know anything. Just participate. Just express your reactions to... What? You have to go to bed?
I do. Yes.
Did I hear you exclaim that you were impressed with the Ike Willis, Bob Dobbs dialogue?
Yeah, that's all I could get in.
Well, you come back when you can if you're going away, but listen to the recordings. We're going to present some more things. What do you think of these Zappa ads? This war in Los Angeles in 1966 between the freak out and the freak off.
The Ike Willis thing was a lot more interesting to me.
Right. Well, part of this is scholarship for the Zappa fans. These things, I don't think many of them have ever heard.
Yeah, it's neat, but it's not as...
No, that was pretty awesome. I mean, that's something that you could form a religion around, that dialogue.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Celebrating Frank the Prophet and then having a disciple of Frank, Ike Willis, who worked with Frank, respond to Bob's extreme inside knowledge about the whole process. I mean, it's fun the way Ike is so excited about it all. It's happening, right? That's what's good.
Yep.
So, a character in this scene is a guy named Kim Fowley, who actually was the teenage Svengali since the late 50s in the rock and roll industry of L.A., and he was a friend of Frank's, or at least for a while, and they have an interview with him, so I'm going to read that later. It's interesting what he has to say, because he had the charisma before Frank did, locally. He did a song in the late 50s called Alley Oop, I think it was called, and different little novelty records he got on, because I think his parents were Hollywood biggies or something. They had connections as a kid. And he went on to brag by, I don't know, mid-70s that he had sex with 5,000 women, 5,000 groupies. And he continued, and he went on to produce that band that Joan Jett came out of. Forget what they were called. So he did occasional production of musics and bands later. But his interview might be neat. But I'm now going to read Carl Pranzoni's letter to the editor that Frank said was misattributed as a member of the Mothers of Invention. This guy is not a member, but he's a friend of Frank's and all that. So let's find that letter. What is Carl Pranzoni? And they're sort of reacting to Tim Leary. Tim Leary's in the news as spreader of information about LSD. So Frank's in the middle of the drug revolution, and we're looking for the material. Haven't found it yet.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, this is Bramley, right?
Yes.
Or Yuri? Okay, Bramley, go ahead.
The psychedelic utopia, is that still possible?
It's been replaced by the ionic utopia. We took over that vision. We provide that idea. It can't be done psychedelically because those drugs met a certain sensory preference that was happening in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and 90s. But we're a very different technological environment now. So the drug solution would not be the same. The drug antidote, the drug inspiration. So, and Ion has come up with answer to that dilemma of stimulating yourself. So we provide the nirvana that psychedelic people once propagated. Okay?
So you're saying the psychedelic revolution was mostly propaganda?
No, I'm saying there was a psychedelic revolution. Marshall McLuhan even said that psychedelics were probably the most important art form in the 60s because the global stimulation of the global theater, rapidly becoming a global membrane, could not be countered by painting, music, dance, sculpture, or literacy, or books. It could not be countered. Those arts, those old Gutenberg arts, were too tiny. And to get tuned into what was going on in the global theater, you need to have your senses rattled, expanded, and other things, other maybe parts of your tactility, the synesthesia part of yourself. So you would take LSD or a psychedelic, a mushroom or something, to break yourself out of the visual space that the industrial age had imprinted on you. And the habits of perception of the industrial age would be inadequate in understanding and feeling comfortable with the global theater surrealistic panorama. So that's back then. LSD, McLuhan said, was the best art, the best human artifact to bring you up to speed to what was happening around you that you couldn't really perceive properly or accurately. But we're in a whole different situation now. Many different thousands of years have passed. Remember, McLuhan said 200 years happens every 12 months. And so the thing to tune yourself to the frequency change coming with the ionic revolution is the RNA drops and other products. But we give you the psychic poise and the resting platform that was claimed for psychedelics 50 years ago. Okay? Now, in light of that, let's read and hear Carl Franzoni, a wild dancer for the Vito group. And Vito was the original scene maker in the clubs. People went to clubs to see Vito dance to the various bands, the Byrds, Mothers of Invention, Arthur Lee's band Love, and other groups there. He is going to talk about LSD in this letter to the editor of the Los Angeles Free Press. Are you ready? You ready, Bramley, to hear this?
I'm listening.
Okay. So he says, Dear Peter Stafford, and I recognize that name. I think he was a publicly known user of LSD, celebrator of LSD. Dear Peter Stafford, and to all the other psychedelic junkies and acid heads. So Carl starts off insulting them, basically. My observation of the psychedelic, this is a guy who's a head freak. He's got charisma, he's got groupies, he's a part of this Vito dancing cult, and they were happening before the LSD comes in. So the LSD cult is a contest for him, maybe, you know what I mean, a threat to his charisma. So he's saying, my observation of the psychedelic world is that you are all escaping and running away from the real issues in this jungle we live in. Then in capital letters, we are at war. We have problems that need to be solved. We have the authority in this country. We have the authority in this country doing all kinds of rotten and inhumane things to us and other people in the world. You who seem to want to forget all these things take a chemical solution that you are not positive of and that changes your body formula into who knows what. This chemical solution makes you for not only 8 to 10 hours, quote, out of your mind, unquote, days, months, maybe years, you may suddenly go out again. I guess that means, it's in brackets, in quotes, go out again means a flashback. We who are interested in stopping the war in Vietnam, who are interested in civil rights, who want to stop police brutality, who want to stop all the rottenness and selfishness that our country is involved in, and who would really like to start a new society or form a new government that would involve all the people, can't afford for 1 minute to get loaded. We cannot just think of ourselves. We must think of all of us. Just think of all the people you know and how you could make a beautiful and wildly friendly world for them to live in. You who get loaded are just thinking of yourselves. We need you, but you are lost to us because you are, quote, boxed out, unquote. If you really think about it, this junk is being pushed on you. Now remember, Zappa I even played him saying in that Flo and Eddie interview, he had a theory way back then that the LSD was being produced by the CIA. And there's lots of evidence for that since in information released from Freedom of Information Act. So this guy is intuiting. He says, if you really think about it, this junk is being pushed on you. If you would only read history, you'd find that in every revolution, junk is always pushed on the people, and the worst kinds, and also is easy to get. You are being dumped. You are being drugged by the authority. You say, the authority is against it. Bullshit. They have publicized this drug more than any other in the history of man. Who is making all the bread from it? The drug companies, the people who are tranquilizing and deadening the minds of our people. They are the authority because they dictate to the authority. They have the money and the lobbies and the people in Washington. Okay, just moving the paper a bit. And the people in... Where is it? And they have the money and the lobbies and the people in Washington. And not only the authority is taking you, quote, down the river, unquote, but your great psychedelic gods are too. Can you imagine the money your Learys, meaning Tim Leary, and your other psychedelic gods are making by taking up collections for them being busted? So can you imagine the money your Learys and your other psychedelic gods are making by taking collections for them being busted, for their public appearances and books and all the other crap that they're selling you? I wonder if they get any royalties from the drug companies. What a laugh they must have together. I have never heard once about one of these people saying anything that might stop the war or do anything for our country's good. And according to them, and all the trips and experiences they have had, they should be able to have figured out almost everything out by now. Read that again. And according to them, and all the trips and experiences they've had, they should be able to have figured almost everything out by now. What have they come up with? How many hairs on a bumblebee's back in a snowstorm at high noon in downtown New York? What have they come up with? How many hairs on a bumblebee's back in a snowstorm at high noon in downtown New York? Have any one of you figured out how to stop killing people on our highways? Or a permanent cure for the clap? Or maybe a simple way to educate our kids so they wouldn't have to go to school and be bored every day? Gee, those psychedelic drugs should be good for something. Maybe you could stick them up your ass and fly to the moon. Maybe you could stick them up your ass and fly to the moon. We saw that in Frank's ad, so Frank was quoting Carl Franzoni. You see a picture of Carl Franzoni on the cover of the World of Zappa's Freakout album. We all talk about freedom when we can't even look a cop in the eye and say, quote, man, you can't bust me. I haven't done anything wrong. I am straight and my senses are clear. I'm not afraid of you because I am right and you are the one who is wrong. Because with a clear head, I am the truth and you are lying if you say I am drugged, unquote. So you're supposed to be able to, we all talk about freedom. When we can't even, we all talk about freedom when we can't even look a cop in the eye and say, man, you can't bust me. I haven't done anything wrong. I am straight. My senses are clear. I'm not afraid of you because I am right and you are the one who's wrong. Because with a clear head, I am the truth and you are lying if you say I am drugged. Then Carl says, the cop has a right to bust you, baby. You are going against the law. That's what makes you paranoid, because you are doing it against the law and you are afraid of the cop. That's what has forced you behind the locked door and into that darkened room. Then in capital letters, a lie, L-I-E. And it says, wake up, people, because if you don't, you will be left out in the cold. Paranoia makes you hide, and when the real struggle comes, you will be caught and trampled. Come out of hiding. Come out into the light, where you can do some good for everyone. Junkies seem to hide in dark places. Come out and join us. We need you. We need each other. The time is drawing closer and closer. When are we going to stand up together with a clear mind and shoulder to shoulder, mind to mind, do something about this screwed up world we live in? I have observed my friends who are artists and sensitive people. They take this junk and they tell me their trips are colorful and rewarding, but I see them become lifeless, colorless, and less sensitive to others' needs. I see them hide and withdraw from society and go behind locked doors. I see their paintings become faded and void of people. I see them become melancholy and lazy. I see them become afraid of their neighbors and of anyone who comes near. I see them being put into mental institutions and jails for long periods. And most of all, I don't see some of them anymore because they are dead. And I miss them so very, very terribly much. Will we miss you? Sincerely, Carl Franzoni. So, that's a pretty intelligent letter. What do you think of that? What do you think of it, Brandon?
It kind of sounds like Frank Zappa's.
It is. It's a result of them, Zappa, Carl, and at least Carl talking to Frank. That became the policy statement of the group of freaks, around the Mothers. I don't know if they're around the Doors or Arthur Lee, but Frank was the one articulating a social purpose of the Chaos and Sunset Strip. And this is dated October 7th, 1966. Exactly 49 years later, Gail Zappa passes on October 7th, 2015. So one more year, it would be exactly 50 years. But 49 is a good number, 7 times 7. And there's 49 keys in the angel chart and some of our recordings. So that is A Mother Against LSD. So isn't that interesting? Of course, it got lost in the din, and nobody could stop the global theater storm. It's just a little puny point of view and a lost cause of chemical body worry and anxiety. Now we got here, here's somebody, Peter Roberts from Sherman Oaks, California, responding to Franzoni's letter. It says, Dear Editor, please accept my thanks and congratulations for printing Carl Franzoni's letter captioned, A Mother Against LSD. See, that's the problem. That's what Frank objected to. It wasn't Carl's problem, but it was a mother. Now, he was a really good associate of Frank Zappa, but he wasn't technically a member of the Mothers of Invention. So a mother in quotes, against LSD is not accurate. So this guy says, congratulations for printing Carl Franzoni's letter captioned A Mother Against LSD in the LA Free Press dated October 17th. No, October 7th. It was great. Here's a cat who speaks the language. Is not an Auslander, A-U-S-L-A-N-D-E-R. I don't know what that is. Must be an insult in the Inland Empire. You know about the Inland Empire? That's the scene outside of L.A., out in the boondocks. They called it the Inland Empire, I think. And that's one of David Lynch's movies. Isn't it called the Inland Empire? Here's a cat who speaks the language, not an Auslander, and puts in a long line of escapers. No, deserters is the proper term. LSD contributes not one iota to ontological development of either its users or those who must put up with their infantilisms. Someone somewhere is making a buck and laughing all the way to the bank at the fools who can't face raw actuality, accept it, and survive it. Every pot user, horse user, horse is heroin, right? Acid head, gangbanger, holy roller, so they're including fundamentalist religion, etc. So every pot user, horse user, acid head, gangbanger, holy roller, etc., ad nauseum, is a member of a true underground. The membership of this group says, as a matter of pure ego, quote, my nerve ends alone deserve the A, soothing, B, titillation. Screw the rest of the world. So the membership of this group says, as a matter of pure ego, quote, my nerve ends, remember I always like to say we're dangling ganglia, my nerve ends alone deserve the A, soothing, B, titillation. Screw the rest of the world, unquote. And as Carl Franzoni has seen, and I have seen, they go slowly into an inescapable reverse gear, back first to the titty and then to the womb, thinking all the time, quote, how clever I am, how hip I am. Well, he says, how clever I am, and in brackets, the translation of how clever I am is how hip I am. I've taken my trip, my capitalized, I've taken my trip into schizophrenia with, as Carl says, paranoid delusional traits. And I've seen God, capital G-O-D, and know what? He's me. That's what Ion says, so a little criticism of simple interpretations of Ion. And me is capitalized. The unhappy part of all these desertion, he calls them desertion mechanisms. So he's calling, here's a cat who speaks the language and puts in a long line, I think he miswrote, puts down a long line of escapers or deserters. So these people leaving for unreality of LSD are deserters. So he says the unhappy part of all these desertion mechanisms is that not only is the user harmed through the wastage of lifetime, what is this? The unhappy part of all these desertion mechanisms is that not only is the user harmed through the wastage of lifetime, but others around him are in danger as well. How often I've heard the refrain, quote, I was so high, in brackets, on juice, marijuana, horse, seeds, close bracket, I don't remember driving home. I was so high, I don't remember driving home, unquote. How many of those same people in my 43 years I have known to fail, what is this? How many of those same people in my 43 years I have known to fail to complete the operation of driving home ever? To what purpose? How many of those same people, is he implying he hasn't met many of them? How many of those same people in my 43 years I have known to fail to complete the operation of driving home? Ever. To what purpose, and where's the cleverness? Of course, the lotus eaters have a right to eat lotus to the point of inanity, but they contribute nothing. They do nothing for themselves, for their immediate neighbors, for humanity as a whole, and they waste precious time, potential for genuinely creative development. So they waste precious time and precious potential for genuinely creative development. ... and quite often break a lot of hearts among those who are concerned for them. And there's so much that needs to be done. Signed, Courage, Peter Roberts, Sherman Oaks, California. So what do you think of that? Any comments?
Well, why is there so much controversy in that whole scene?
Well, what's happening is the cops are beating up the kids and forcing the clubs to shut down. The merchants are putting pressure on the club owners to not let kids mingle on the streets. So there's this sort of instant community and early Woodstock forming on Sunset Strip, and the authorities don't like it. So they're beating up the kids, and a lot of injuries and pain is happening. And Frank is sort of trying to take responsibility for it and trying to get people to cool off. And they don't want people taking drugs and hallucinating and running around in the middle of what's already a pretty chaotic, dangerous situation. Now, there's more letters.
So he was taking up the... So Frank Zappa was taking up... He was taking up the responsibility for the youth culture?
Well, he was expressing his point of view and what he objected to.
Oh, okay.
So they have other responses to these. Now, this is the original argument over drugs in the LA scene before it's really happening in any other cities. You have to realize that what's going on in California was what's going to happen to the rest of the country gradually. So this is the experimental concentration camp that the authorities are watching to see what's happening. So there's a guy named Uncle Tom in Ojai, California, writes a letter in response to Carl's letter. So let's see what this guy says. Now, he's out in Ojai, California, where Krishnamurti, who is on my Android meme chart, has a base, an operation in Ojai, California. So is this Uncle Tom part of the Krishnamurti world? early precursor of the sort of New Age world. So he says, a letter to a mother from an uncle. A letter to a mother from an uncle. Mother and uncle in quotes. After reading your comment in the LA Free Press, I find myself a need to express my feelings to you on the use of chemical means and ways of experimenting. As being a user of such, in brackets, some chemicals, I find your statement totally out of place. I wish to explain that all I say is only about myself, because speaking of someone else is not my job or scope, as each person is on their own trip, and they should speak for themselves. In brackets, I hope, I hope, question mark, and trip is in quotes with a capital T. As I sit in my local laundromat writing this letter, in brackets, mess, question mark, so this guy has a bit of an inferiority complex, I see the usual mothers sitting at the rear talking about motherhood and other types of hoods. I wonder if they know what a trip can be, and I wonder if they wish to know. They are not of the underground or the anti-something or anti-other. They want the usual things, yet you also seem to... They want the usual things, yet you also seem to want, he's addressing Carl Franzoni, yet you also seem to want the usual things and cry for the need of us, in quotes, capital U.S., in brackets, whatever that means, question mark, cry for the need of us. I've been down that street before. I sat in another laundromat in Omaha, that would be Nebraska, and listened to the papers about new reforms and new plans and new directions and new newness, capital N, newness. And I know that I'm corrupt in my soul, my church, my leaders, my friends and fellow workers are all corrupt also. So I guess he means when he's in Omaha, his associates are corrupt. I see the evil, the inhumanness, the sad, the drunks, the hunger and the pain. I've listened to you and all the others tell me that I'm running away from living and not facing the need of this world. And he has capital letters. But only by the use of such some chemical have I become very acutely aware of the reality lie. He's become aware of the reality lie and the need of getting totally out of the prison we all walk in. Your plans are wonderful, and only one small fact I can see. I've been down that street before and heard this all before. I'm tired of listening to people tell me about the great new color schemes and plans for changing my walls in the real prison. The locked door you speak of and the hidden awayness you speak of is our trip in quotes, and I, for one, want it that way because of the simple reason of the laws and such. Laws in capital letters. One other bone to speak of, and I will go my way. One other bone to speak of. So one more thing he's going to say. One other bone to speak of, and I will go my way. You speak of war and fighting and the need to do some sort of battle, and your call for help to paint the very prison walls you are also in. I'm not at war, and I have no need to fight and run, in brackets with banners flying. And I'm not at war, and I have no need to fight and run with banners flying into battle. And since you tell me I'm boxed in and such, I will not heed your call to any paint program. So this guy says social legislation is just painting the walls of a prison, a bigger prison. Now, McLuhan said the satellite creates a global concentration camp, so this guy might be perceiving some aspect of that. I'm not going to either paint or fight. I'm going to use my chemical means to do something else. Love, big capital letters. Love, L-O-V-E. I've stood in picket lines long enough and walked to Mississippi and walked to Washington and flown above Watts long enough. I now know that at least in my world the answer is love, capital L-O-V-E. All capitalized. And I hope that through the use of my chemicals to become more of a person capable of love towards my human fellow American man. Your statements on the chemical users you know is narrow and very lifeless, and also rather unknowing. All I can really say is take a good hard look at love in quotes, and then use a chemical, and then you might love instead of fighting and hating and running into battle with your good and wonderful doings. Uncle Tom, Ojai, California. So what do you think of that? There's the battle lines drawn. Do you get active or do you retreat? That was the war in the counterculture. Mm-hmm. Anybody here?
Yep.
Yes, Bramley.
Well, that was in California, you said? LA?
Yes, this is another letter to the editor in the Los Angeles Free Press, October 7th, 1966.
Bob, so it was Carl Franzoni who wrote the letter?
wrote the letter criticizing those taking drugs. And now we've heard the other side from Uncle Tom from Ojai, California, saying he got love through the LSD. He'd rather be a lover and not a radical social protester.
So what was the contrast to the love system he was exemplifying through his writings?
The contrast is people like Carl Franzoni out in the streets protesting whatever social activism they could come up with to stop the war, and they didn't like people disappearing and hiding in their homes on LSD. But this guy, Uncle Tom's saying he's celebrating going and doing it. He's glad to go in his little Roman hideout and take his LSD.
Beautiful.
So is it beautiful? You mean you agree with that view?
Well, because I see the mother stepping in through that.
Through the taking the drugs? See, we're talking two different things. So through drugs, the mother steps in?
Well, the mother's stepping in to speak to speak to the land that her children, quote unquote, are kind of dabbling in, by being under the influence of LSD and everything, saying, let's come together, let's reconnect, junkies, come out, this really gathering, and I really feel that he was speaking on behalf of that mother that was known to be lost.
Symbol. Yeah, you're saying the mother's a positive symbol.
Yes, a very positive symbol.
Right.
For them, to kind of like bring them together, feed them,
Nurture.
Yeah, nurture them.
Well, McLuhan said that rock and roll is the hand. No, the Beatles were the hand that rocks the cradle, rules the world. So McLuhan made fun of the Beatles propagating this love sentiment. But they were hijacking the mother archetype. The hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. So I suspect you're falling victim to a Jehovah's Witness idea of motherhood, an all-American safety valve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was just going to ask that, what would McLuhan say to that writer of the letter, someone who's...
McLuhan says? He wrote this. He wrote in student newspapers at the time, 67, 66. He said, the reason people take LSD is they're trying to tune into a psychedelic global environment symbolized by television. He said, if you bring TV into a society, people want to take drugs. It's a way of updating your limited senses to the actual amazing stimulation that television environment is giving you and the global theater inside the... So he would say, if we want to deal with this problem, we've got to turn off TV. That's how you deal with the drug problem, if you think it's a problem. Turn off television, which is causing people wanting to take drugs. And the Evergreens once told me that when kids were at home in the suburban situation in high school, they'd have TV a lot. And then they would go to college, and they wouldn't have TV in their dorm, back in the 70s or 80s. So they would be deprived of the stimulation of television and then gravitate pretty quickly to taking drugs or maybe alcohol binges or whatever to get the effect of television, which the parents did not realize was making their kids addicted to that TV stimulation. And when they went to college and were isolated from the normal suburban situation in their dorms, they had to compensate for the TV effect. So they took drugs. I thought that was a pretty interesting statement.
True.
That is
because, a few years earlier, nobody's taking drugs. They're drinking and that, and the kids were pretty mild in the 30s and 40s before World War II, at least as the media presented them. And all of a sudden, Hoover has brought in legislation. You see that movie Reefer Madness, and made dope dealers the ultimate pariahs and enemies of the society. So you have the people agreeing with that, and then 20 years later, they're all trying to take drugs, including medical drugs, whatever those ones that Carolyn could name, I forget them. people in medicine were really starting to get over-medicated. So the stimulation of the central nervous system was an inevitable effect across the board, no matter what your opinion, what religion or diet maker you were affected by the collective TV environment inside the satellite global theater. And that made you want that kind of stimulation. So you took drugs.
Wow.
Right? So that's that's what McLuhan would say.
Do you think if people knew what McLuhan, what his take was on it, do you think they would even do anything about the TV?
Oh. No.
They wouldn't, right?
He said by the 70s, he said, this world is so confused, the only refuge is the church. I think he said the true church. Now, I don't know. Does he mean the Roman Catholic Church? He criticized the Pope and those guys as not understanding what was going on. So don't know actually what he meant by church, but on the surface it meant the Catholic Church. He said, becoming a Christian was the only way out because the devil had hijacked the global theater. He called him the Prince of the Air. He said, the Prince of the Air, a master of hardware and software, a great electric engineer. That was his definition of Lucifer.
That's a really gorgeous metaphor.
Right, and so McLuhan is realize, not like, first of all, he was heard by a lot of people for a short time because he was made famous, and nobody understood him, and nobody knew what he was saying, and they never realized that's what he was advocating. Maybe a couple of professors who read his works understood it, but he did get publicity, but like any other piece of information in the information overload of the 60s, no position would have any staying power. The people were too busy being stoned on the electric media. Now, how would you turn off the electric environment? You can imagine the coordination of doing that.
Yeah, it would be nearly impossible.
Yeah. So in a way, all of that McLuhan, this is the satire part, all of his explaining why things were happening, the causes, offering solutions, was a huge satire. Because in the end, he, as a Catholic, felt that the religious impulse, spiritual impulse that he thought he was doing was the answer. So he's making fun of all
because he didn't know anything else.
Right. And he was he was criticizing all the pagan, secular, humanist agendas. He was always ridiculing them, and he had a way of ridiculing them by saying, you guys don't know that the media environment is bigger than your little agendas. And it's massaging yourself. And here's Zappa in his commercial has this Susie Cream Cheese saying, ourselves massaging ourselves. But the book, The Medium is a Massage, hadn't come out yet. But maybe they knew of what McLuhan was saying. So let me read a short letter, another one. This is from, it says, your admirer and follower, Marja from Huntington Beach in California. And I'm not sure who she's saying she's admiring. I think she's appreciating the newspaper first. And it says, P.S., please excuse my spelling, but written words, and especially in English, are hard for me to spell. Your words are tricky, because she's from Finland. Dear editor, I have moved and would appreciate the free press being sent to my new address. I am moving to Finland in April of 1967, and I would like to know if the free press can be delivered there and what the price is for first-class mail, which I presume is airmail delivery. I have learned the truth about America from your paper and find it most comforting to read such a paper instead of the L.A. Times and New York Times lies. We from other countries are totally misled by such papers as the Times. I hope you can succeed with your good writings till one day people wise up and can communicate without written or spoken words. That's like ESP. My people in Finland will learn the truth when I go home and spread the free press and tell of my experiences with lysergic acid dialethimide. In other words, she took LSD, and other groovy goodies which make one forget himself and really see the light. All is good, even those who don't understand. Your admirer and follower, Marja, Huntington Beach, California. So that's someone supporting Uncle Tom. And so you see, She thinks the LA Free Press would change the world in land.
Do you think they reverse engineered some of the mediums that were being used to massage us?
You said, do I think? You didn't finish your question.
Well, do you think that...
Do it again.
Do you think that they, as in those in California, related to what you just read, reverse engineered the mediums that were used to massage us?
No influence. That's why I talk about the android meme as starting in the 60s. That was the obsolescence of human flesh, the chemical body, and a new matrix was coming in and taking over human experience. And nothing could stop it. I mean, these are just puny little letters to the editor. I mean, within a year, the whole LSD street scene is now converted to speed and beginning of heroin as the mafia moved in on the Haight-Ashbury and started selling, distributing, Charles Manson, those guys, distributing hard drugs. So a couple of years later, it's not a battle over whether you should take LSD or not. It's oh my God, half the population becoming a junkie, through heroin.
Mm-hmm.
And it wouldn't be half the population technically, but it would seem that way as your friends got succumbed to it. So, and then the 70s, Quaaludes came in, and then people just took drugs as a part of their being. It was not an ethical question anymore.
It was part of survival in a way, too.
Yeah, surviving the effects of the global theater. So we're reading this scene that Frank Zappa was part of. This forms his modus operandi. He was interviewed in Cream magazine, I think about 10 years later, and he had to describe himself, and he said, frozen in 1966. So he admitted there was something going on in 66 that he was part of. He was a public advocate in the LA scene, and it got so bad he couldn't get any work in the club, so he moved to New York City, and he performed in a theater, their show twice a day for 6 months in the theater in New York City, and that's how they became famous. Their theater act was so fantastic.
Okay. So they were kind of feeding it also.
You say they were kind of feeding it. Who's they? The Zappa?
Not Zappa, but the ones who were part of the sort of theater scene, the Broadway.
Well, Zappa was feeding the theater scene by producing theater. Is that what you're saying?
Well, you mentioned someone else who got involved with theater. Who was that? You mentioned it very quickly.
Just in the past half hour?
In the past minute and a half.
Right. What was that? I said someone...
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Someone was in theater.
Yes.
Didn't I say something about Hollywood or something?
You mentioned New York City, Broadway.
Oh, Zappa. Zappa performed his musical show called Absolutely Free, Pigs and Repugnant, in the Garrick Theater down in the Village for 6 months.
Oh, geez. Okay. So I see some of his formulas did kind of raise red flags to where he became a target. Because he did connect with certain artists, or I would say freaks, or freakouts.
He was organizing the community of freaks. He was music being a charismatic union. And he objected to these businessmen coming in with their freak offs and freak ins to counter the relatively free and spontaneous freak out.
Mm-hmm. So with some of these freak outs he connected with or worked with along the way, they kind of did poison his work, didn't they?
No. He had all kinds of crazy freaks in his autobiography. He tells stories about the weird individual ones that showed up every now and then. When he was at the log cabin, a guy showed up with a gun, tried to shoot him, or was positioning himself to have that motive, it looked like. And Frank deftly, disgunned him, got the guy to throw his gun into the pond or something nearby. Oh, yeah, you've read the book. It's very, very good what he did. I mean, pretty brave.
Yeah, and he was a real hero that day.
Yeah. And now, is that does he write about, he doesn't write about, that's in Pauline Butcher's book, so you've read that.
Yeah, she wrote about it.
Yeah, she's the only one who knew about it, basically. But have you read any other Zappa books? Is that the books you're talking about when you talk about what you're reading?
That, and along with The Real Frank Zappa.
Yeah, his own book, which doesn't talk about the gun story. Only Pauline tells us that.
Yeah, I don't remember, because I was just reading the chapter about his parents and how his father always wanted to write this book on the history of the world.